they have increased chances of things like paranoias, schizophrenia, and things like this. And there seems to at least be some sort of correlation here between certain types of behavior being accentuated when you take these kind of things, and they're really not necessary. Now, they say sometimes, and this is a common mantra in Western society, that, oh, you need to let them make their own mistakes. No, you don't. You don't need to make your own mistakes. A wise man can learn from the mistakes of someone else.
And foremost, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that basically when a group of companions came to him and asked, we're dealing with these horrible doubts, these doubts that if we believed them, they would lead to kufr, horrible doubts. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he looked at them, he said that this is good news. This is good news. And obviously it sounds oxymoronic. How is, big doubts in faith good news? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said it's a sign of high iman. And think about it. If you have catastrophic, life-changing doubts about your religion, it can't be anything other than a sign that you have high faith, because you don't wake up in the morning and become worried that unicorns don't exist because you never believed in unicorns in the first place. So the fact that these doubts are worrying you is a sign that you have high iman, that you actually believe in Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the Realist Podcast in the Dunya, featuring the host of the Realist Philosophical Podcast in the Dunya, mashallah, Yusuf Ponders. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, ya Rab. Alhamdulillah.
I always feel like I have to ask that at the beginning of a recording, even if we've already been speaking.
Bro, I made the conscious decision not to ask it because it's so repetitive every time.
They don't know that. They don't know that.
Yeah, they're just experiencing it fresh.
They're gonna see, bro. They're gonna see the first episode in September. They're gonna see the next one probably a week or two after that. It's now July 10th, and they're probably like, wow. So I got two questions. One, is your name Yusuf Ponders or Pondering Soul? Because when I found you a couple months ago, I remember Yusuf Ponders, but today I see Pondering Soul.
So when I set up the channel, I was like, I need a channel name. Mm-hmm. And so I went through this creative process, writing down a bunch of words associated with the sort of things I wanted to do. And then Pondering Soul was the end result of that. And then when I went to go and make a Twitter, it was like, I can't do Pondering Soul because that's already been taken. So it's like, well, my name's Yusuf. Pondering, Ponders, Yusuf Ponders. So I made Yusuf Ponders as the tag for my Twitter, and then Yusuf Ponders just kind of stuck. So like when people talk to me, because it sounds more like a name, Yusuf Ponders.
Okay.
People will call me Yusuf Ponders, but the YouTube channel is called Pondering Soul. And then I guess Yusuf Ponders would be my quote unquote Islamic name, although Ponders isn't.
Do you mind, like, I don't know if this is something you're comfortable with, so no, nothing, I'm not going to take it personally, but what name were you born with?
Yeah, so this is top secret information, no one's privy to it, so I can tell you, I don't mind, but my name's my mum called me Sean, yeah. I
got a little bit of paradigm shift. You know when you like know someone, you just form like a prototype in your brain, their name, and then you have like this identity shift. Now I'm just like, bro, Sean, or no, I'm just
so it's like when someone, you're used to seeing someone with glasses, and then they take the glasses off all of a sudden, and it's like, whoa, this is like a whole new person to me. Who's this guy?
See Sean looks like that frat bro in the pics from the early episode. if you guys know what you know, then you saw that picture. But it got me thinking, and we were talking a lot about nafs and controlling our desires, and Yusuf alayhi salam was a wonderful study in controlling one's desires and putting Allah first and not being so hedonistic. Did that have anything to do with you picking that name, or was it something else?
No. Although he is, and this is completely coincidental, but the story of Yusuf alayhi salam is like one of my favorite. And in terms of, the stories of the prophets, I always really, really enjoy that particular surah. But it had nothing to do with how I ended up with that name. So when I took my Shahada, I used to like sort of hang about with this particular friend of mine, and his family are Muslim. And his uncle kept asking me, what's my Muslim name? I said, I don't have one. And I didn't really want to change my name. I wanted to sort of stick to the name that I had. I didn't like the idea of changing my name at that time. And but they kept asking me, and he was a nice guy and I liked him. So I said, you pick my name. And so he said, how about Yusuf? And then I was like, oh, that's funny, because my middle name is Joseph. And that's my dad's name as well, Joseph. And in Polish, Joseph is said Yusuf. My mum's Polish. So Yusuf was like this weird combination of my dad's name said in a Polish way, but it was like my Muslim name. And so yeah, Yusuf sounds good. So his family just always referred to me as Yusuf. But then whenever I spoke to anyone else, I always introduced myself as Sean. And then when I started the channel, originally I just wanted to sort of keep my real name and everything like out of the way and just stick to this notion of Yusuf Ponders and the whole personality around that. So that sort of stuck and grew the way it did, and so now I feel more like a Yusuf than I do a Sean, but my family still call me Sean.
We got Sean, we got Pondering Soul, we got Yusuf Ponders, we got Lighthouse Mentoring 2 in the building. MashaAllah.
Yeah, Sapiens Institute. There's too many things.
Sapiens Institute.
Thought Adventure Podcast.
Okay, so I have 2 more questions. I don't want to spend too much time on this, so we can blaze through it and then we can go into some deep philosophy, inshallah. So number 1, tell me about your upbringing. So this is just family. I know you were born, I think Catholic, you said, right?
Yeah. So my mum's side of the family all from Poland. Dad's side of the family all from Scotland. Mum's side of the family, sort of farmers, rural areas. And dad's side of the family is all like council estate, which I think you just call ghettos or something, but like really rough areas in Glasgow. And they were both Catholic. And while I was younger, my dad, I mentioned in the last one, he had a heroin problem. So he was always in and out of prison. Eventually he passed away when I was 9. And my mother was like the one that worked and brought in all the money. So she was always working in restaurants and things like that. And I did go to a Catholic school, and I was christened, baptized, and all of that. And so I did learn about the Catholic faith. And we used to go to Sunday school, which was a Polish Sunday school, which was centered around, learning more and more about quote unquote proper Catholicism, because the Polish are sort of heavily Catholic. So yeah, I had that for a long time. But then when my dad passed away, we kind of just drifted away from religion. I, to begin with, became more like misotheist. So like, I remember when my dad passed, one of the first things I was saying when I was trying to pack my bag, because we were going to Scotland because we buried him there. I remember getting angry and then like sort of arguing with God. And I was only 9 at the time, so I was quite young, but I have a vivid memory of being on my own in my bedroom, arguing with God and sort of being angry. And then sort of that misotheism, as I got a bit older, turned into atheism. And me, my brother, we kind of grew up being able to do what we wanted whenever we wanted. So we had a sort of very free household. My mum was always at work. The person that did look after us was my grandmother from my mother's side, who was a little Polish woman who spoke very little English, and she suffered from things like paranoid schizophrenia. So she was a bit of a quirky character, to say the least. But so she raised us, but she wasn't very, what's the word? Authoritative. She just let us do what we wanted. She never really told us what to do, and so we sort of had free reign
Wait, this is your mother?
My grandmother.
Grandmother, okay, yeah.
My grandmother. My mum was working a lot, so my grandmother was the one who used to just watch us. But yeah, she was a very free spirit, we'll say. So she wasn't really on our backs or anything, and we used to pretty much do what we wanted. So we had this very sort of free childhood where we got to do what we wanted. We used to break into things like there was this warehouse near us, and I think when I was in year 6, which would have been I was maybe about 10, we broke into this warehouse, and it was filled with alcohol. And so we pulled all of this alcohol out of this warehouse, and then we got all the kids from the estate onto this field, and we got everyone drunk, and we were all, and that was everyone, like even the younger kids, they were like 6, 7 years old, and like we just got the whole child population of our local area drunk, and then we all went home, and then we all passed out and got clocked by parents and grounded and this and the other. So, but like we were free enough to be able to like do those kind of things during the day. And yeah, so that was pretty much teenage years. Went to a secular school, high school. I was into like heavily into music and smoking weed and kind of into drinking, but not much. I'd do it because like everyone around me was doing it, but it was something that always made me a little bit anxious. I much preferred being this sort of stoner type. And yeah, so I sort of grew up, left school, but kept getting in trouble. Like I dropped out of college twice. Just started working in restaurants, gardening, things like that, and just working and earning money, and then spending that on things like clothes, sparkly earrings, and weird haircuts with patterns. I used to get patterns bit into my hair with a cutthroat razor.
In the picture.
Yeah, and I had that done once every 1.5 weeks, and it used to cost like £15 each time. So I used to.
You got to keep it fresh, yeah.
Yeah, so much money on getting my hair done and that. And yeah, I was just like obsessed with that kind of thing. Used to save up £1,000 and then go blast it all in the Trafford Centre on like aftershave and clothes and trying to make myself look sick. And I look back now, it just makes me cringe. But yeah, I was dead into that. It was quite materialistic. Ended up working in things like call centres for a little bit, which basically customer service and sales and upgrades, that kind of stuff. And I did really well at that. Ended up earning quite a lot quite early on, but then I started getting sick of it, so I just saved up. I think it was like £7,000 or something, and then I was like, I'm going to go traveling. So I went traveling around Asia for about 1.5 years in 2012, and I was supposed to visit something like 18 countries in 6 months, and then I ended up being away for 18 months instead of 6. Instead of seeing 18 countries, I only saw, I think, like 6 or 7 or 8 at top. And it's because I went somewhere and I didn't want to leave. So I just stay there for ages.
You took $7,000 with you.
Yeah.
And you made that last
18
a
months.
1.5 years. No way. I mean, it's Asia. I can see that happen, bro.
Well, not just that. I lived like a hobo. Like I was, honestly, I might even be able to find some pictures. But like I was living like, I was happy to live like an absolute scruff. So in Korea, so that was the first place we went to. We went and we stayed in a temple, a Buddhist temple, and we didn't have to spend anything there. All we had to do was work on the farm. So we didn't spend any money for 2 weeks at all. So we were there working on farms. They were feeding us, and we had somewhere to stay. And then when we left there, we did things like we went and we found a public park in the middle of Seoul in Korea. And there was this like utility building in the middle of the public park, and we climbed up on the roof and we got cardboard and we made like a little hobo tent, and we slept on a roof in the middle of a park. And then we got woke up by the rain in the morning, and so we got off, or we'd sleep on benches on top of hills or something, or and then we did things like when I got to Taiwan, we were couch surfing, which is like a traveler's social media where people will let you stay in their house for free. Really weird concept, but it's a thing. And so we were just staying with people, and then they were showing us around, and they'd just let us crash in their house. That didn't cost anything.
They give you food too, or you had to pay for that?
Etiquette is you'd bring them food. you don't. It's not the case. And sometimes, depending on who you were with, they'd give you food. If they, if they were doing, certain people were really nice. Certain people just loved the ability to engage with foreigners and travelers. And if they were well off, they'd have lots of food and things like that. So that was the case. So sometimes you'd be staying with things like people like students who didn't necessarily have the money, but they were interesting people and they wanted to meet people. And so you'd recognize what was going on. Usually you'd come to the house with like fruit or something, or you'd say, this is how we generally operated anyway. We'd say, let's go for something and we'll pay for the meal or whatever. But some people didn't do that. Some people would just use it as like a stop, and then they would literally just sleep there and not really spend time with the host and then get off. So we did things like that. There was one guy we stayed with, and he was an old man, an old American man who was the king of the vegans, who bought some land in the middle of Taiwan on this mountain.
I mean, but Rami, if I know you have your Dao training right now, right? So if you want to go for that, no worries, bro.
I want to cut off the brother, but
yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, bro.
Yeah.
We'll speak again.
Yeah, bro, go on.
So yeah, this guy, he just bought some land on this mountaintop in the jungle in Taiwan, and we went and crashed in his, and he said, right, you're staying here. And basically we had a roof with no walls, so it was like these 4 posts in the jungle on this mountain. It was just a roof, and then the bed was like just a raised wooden platform with a mosquito net around it, and then that was like where we were to stay. And then we were sleeping at night, and there was bats flying around the tent, and there was cicadas. I don't know if anyone knows what a cicada is, but it's just this really, 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 really loud insect that screams almost. It's like, and you've just got like 50 of these around your head in the middle of the night. There was just no sleeping. We're like, we're not saying it. And the guy turned out to be a bit crazy as well, because he lived there on his own. And he was like, let's go get food. And so his version of let's go get food wasn't like, let's go KFC or anything. It was, let's walk into the jungle and then try and find weird roots in the ground or growths off a tree or a flower. And so he was like, oh, there's a banana tree. I was like, oh, buzzing, we're going to get some bananas. Nope. We're going to get the flower and we're going to eat the flower. And he basically just crushed this banana flower thing with some other stuff and made this goo. And he was like, bon appetit. It was disgusting. So we tried, like, obviously we didn't want to be rude. So we were trying to, like, we were putting tuna in it and that, trying to make it edible. But it was horrible. And so, yeah, we didn't stay there for long. But that was free. And then when we went to Malaysia, we went to this island called Tiamen. And there was a woman running a bar. And she had a few chalets that were like run down. Like run down's probably not even a good enough word to describe the quality of the chalets, but they were really, really old. They were in disrepair. The toilets were like constantly dripping and leaking. So there was loads of mold and everything in the bathroom. The bed was like 1,000,000 years old. And we had like a sheet that wasn't even fitted. And it was just, you'd put the sheet on top of it. And there was a fan that you turned on, and to feel the effect of the fan, you had to have like your face pretty much right next to it. But if you turned it off, you could see like a century's worth of dead insects that had been chewed up by this fan. And then there was just jungle just growing over it and taking it. And I'll see if I can find the picture of and there was always people staying there because we didn't have to pay. So we said, we'll help you run your bar. Just let us stay in one of your crappy chalets. And so she was like, yeah, no problem. So she let us stay here. And so we were always having people like sort of stay there with us. And so that rather than sleeping in the bed, you get a double bed, you usually sleep in it lengthways. We would maybe have like 4 or 5 people sleeping in it widthways instead of, so you could fit more people on.
Bro, that reminds me of, but I'll tell you about that after.
No, go on.
Yeah, I went to Iceland with Anghel, who was the 3rd brother who couldn't make it tonight for the 3 Muslims, and another brother. And when we went to Iceland, it was just supposed to be 2 of us. It wasn't supposed to be 3. So it was the last minute plan. And bro, if you know anything about Iceland, it's crazy expensive. So we booked Airbnbs weeks and months in advance. So what we did was we went with 3 mans in all these 2 people accommodations. Yeah. Usually it was a double or queen bed.
But I improvised
the width thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so
There's bro. Back then I used to snore a lot. Apparently, according to Anha, I don't snore anymore now, but apparently it was so bad. This man in the freezing cold, he would take our car keys, go to our car, and then when we woke up, I would like eat breakfast, do my thing, come in the car, he's still asleep, bro. He's passed out.
Frozen in the car.
Frozen in the car.
So let me share my screen, I'll show you.
Go for it, bro. I'll just quickly.
So this is the only surviving picture I have of this place. But yeah, so like on the inside, it was just absolutely shocking. And when you can see the floor on this, so you see the floor, that wood kind of flooring that you see underneath me, that was what it was like inside of the chalet as well. And then we strung up these hammocks, and you can see the jungle is like, it's just pure jungle there, mate. It's not like, oh, let's just walk through this jungle kind of jungle. It's no, we need a machete.
Yeah.
If we're gonna, you're not walking through it. But it was just, yeah, it was such a scruffy den. And but yeah, we were chilled. Like, it was free, so it just meant the more we could live like this, the longer we could travel for. And we'd always eat cheap, so we'd always eat street food. Like when I went Myanmar, we had the option to, I was on my own at this point, but I had the option to stay in a room and spend a bit more. But I was always like, no. What's the cheapest? Is that we can stay in the corridor for $3. And so like I would basically sleep in the corridor of this like hostel, next to a few other people who also wanted to travel cheap. So they'd be sleeping in the corridor as well, outside of people's rooms. And then you'd go for food and you'd find like, it's like a back alley, like an alleyway, and someone had made a restaurant. And this restaurant was basically some stones next to the curb, with a fire, and then a pot put on top of stones on a fire next to a curb, like in a gutter, in a back alley. And then the tables were just like buckets that are turned upside down, and the chairs were the same buckets turned upside down. So you just like basically table and chairs were just upside down food buckets or like oil buckets, whatever. And then and you'd spend like a couple of dollars to get like a huge scran that someone's made in some alley, on a fire next to the curb.
So there was definitely no daughter in the picture back then.
No, definitely not.
Because you're not doing this, bro, with a daughter in the picture.
I'd probably not. I wouldn't do that. I'd probably still be a bit hobo. I'd obviously be conscious of keeping her safe, so I'd try to be a bit more careful. Whereas with me, it was like I was quite happy just sleeping in really weird places, which, looking back now, was probably quite dangerous a few times. But I don't know, young, stupid, this, like, in love with this idea of the adventure lifestyle.
What's a takeaway? Like one big lesson, if you had to only pick one. I know there was tons of things you probably picked up on, but one main piece of wisdom from this nomad lifestyle.
It's like Peter Pan, man. The Never Land. It's this attempt to not really grow up, and it's, they sell it quite well. I can sell it quite well. I can tell you about all these amazing stories, but it's never like that. Like, it's intense. It's wrapped up with some of the biggest sort of amazing experiences, like constant sequences of the feeling of awe, almost like every week, to feelings of severe depression. And it was just an up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's a really weird way to live, because like when you get bored, you move on, you go somewhere else, you check something else out. You're doing mad stuff, like you're eating scorpions one minute, or like you're eating mystery meat that you later find out after the fact turned out to be like dog or something weird, and it's like, oh well, I probably wouldn't have eaten that if I'd have known it was a dog. Just mad things like this. That island, to that photo that I showed you, that was Tiaman Island. Beautiful place. Fell in love with it. I lived there for about 8 months. I ended up, that particular bar was I think a Norwegian woman's bar, And the second time I went, I worked at another bar, which I ended up running rather than basically I paid rent to the guy who owned the dive shop. And then we ran this bar. And that was mad because it was like I was a full-time resident in this place pretty much. And if I needed to leave, it'd be once every 3 months when visa was running out and I come back. But this place was like paradise. And that's probably the major thing that made me want to stay there, because it was like we lived on a beach. You woke up in the morning, you just jump off the jetty into the ocean, and it took 2 minutes to get into the ocean. And that was the wake up sort of thing. And it's beautiful, clear waters. You got all these mad fish, turtles and that. And just crystal clear water, beautiful. But there was a lot of mad things going on the island. Like people had bad drug addictions. So it was and you know, these are people that I would talk to, like the youth around about my age, really good lads. You get on with them, and then they'd just be like in my toilet doing heroin or something, and then you'd be like, "What are you doing?" And they would talk about heroin like it was like nothing, you know,
like cereal, yeah.
Yeah, like it was niche. It's like, bro, that's not a good thing to be doing that. Why are you doing that? But they couldn't get it. Obviously, I had a particular experience because of my dad, which made me see it in a very sort of particular way. But it was just really weird to see them not have that same experience at all. It was like it was nothing. And then there was other lads that were like on meth. Or like
let me ask you this, and once again, bro, I'm gonna remind you, anything you don't want to talk about, just not gonna take it personally.
Yeah, no,
right?
Don't worry, bro. I'm an open book.
What made you quit weed? Was it more Islam, or was it kind of before that you were already like outgrowing that?
Yeah, so I'd been smoking it on and off since I was about 12. Mostly on, very little time off. So, and it became like a huge part of my life for a very, very, very long time. I was like a heavy advocate for it. Like I really thought that it was going to like solve all the world's problems. And I used to pride myself in being able to make what I refer to as super zoots, which are basically like you'd get loads of Rizzler and put them together. And I was really, really, really good at making big ones, which was good for communal smoking, which came in real handy when I was traveling, because it was always like a really good icebreaker. Nearly everyone smoked. And so you would just be like, oh, I can make a super zoot. And you'd just make this stupidly large smoking thing. All right. There was this other one called, it was like a cross joint.
Yeah, double joint, cross joint, yeah.
I could make them. I just used to make all these like fancy things, and I loved it. And it was like a really big part of my life for a long time. And it was difficult to sort of give it up. When I got back from traveling, I still loved it. And but I was starting to hate it because it got to a point where it was like every day, all day. I would wake up in the morning. The first thing I would do is like hit a bong or like smoke something, or like it was just it felt like there wasn't really a moment I wasn't stoned out of my head. And then being sober was weird because I was high.
It was boring.
Yeah, and it was it was just costing too much. It was like here, weed's really, really expensive. It's like for like a £20, you're getting like 1.8, 1.9 gram. And if you're buying it in a larger amount, you're spending like upwards to maybe 200 to 250 pounds for an ounce of weed, which is just extortionate. So yeah, it was costing me too much money, and it was just taking too much time. And I was going through about 3.5 grams of it a day, which is a lot of money's worth. And yeah, it just got to a point where I was like, I need to quit, but it was hard. So what I did is I just sort of reduced my usage a lot. And I moved out and I stopped hanging about with a lot of people that was doing that kind of thing. And I took my shahada at this point, but I was still smoking for a while because it was really, really, really difficult to let go of. And like I was quite isolated, and it was something I used quite a lot to sort of help manage my anxieties. So I kept smoking it for a bit, and then eventually with my wife, I found out that she was pregnant, and the news of the daughter was it. That was it then. Never touched it again. And not just weed, I stopped smoking. Like just finding out I was going to be a dad.
You never went back.
Never.
Do you feel like a lot? I don't want to say like that's why you have a daughter, but it's almost like it was a perfect time to like, everything happened in his qadar to like get you to kind of abstain.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely like a key moment. Like I'd been battling on and off, even just like smoking. So it was weird because there was a period where I used to smoke cigarettes, and then I would also smoke weed. And so I saw myself as someone who smoked cigarettes and smoked weed. Eventually I give up cigarettes, but then I still smoke weed. And no matter what, it was like weed was something really difficult to let go of, because it was also a really social element of my life. It was something that was really easy to sort of, everyone I knew smoked it. Everyone around me was always smoking it. And it's just always like the first thing, oh, why don't you come round and we'll do this and we'll watch some funny movies. And so we just like be idiots and get stoned and watch stupid stuff.
You never had any like bad trips?
Yes, I did.
Of course. Those didn't make you want to quit?
No.
But it was the end all, where it was like it just happened, right? Where you chose to humble yourself before Allah humbled you in a way.
Yeah. So it was just, you know what it was? The news of a daughter was like, I've got to sort myself out. I've got grown up now. I can't be no muppet. Like, I'm not going to be. And just the thought of her being around that kind of thing just knocked me sick. Like, it was like, I don't want to be a dad that smokes around my daughter. I don't want to be a dad that has to go off and sneak and hide to smoke and then come back stinking. Or like, I don't want to be having a baby around me and me being stoned, or me being wanting to be stoned, or even if like, because a baby is a 24/7 thing, man. Like they're waking up throughout the night. They're always needing your help. There's no, oh, let me get stoned and not have to like deal with a baby. Like there's no opportunity. Like if you're getting stoned, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to have to deal with a baby while you're high. And the thought of ever doing that was like, no, I ain't doing that. So yeah, just gave it up. Never. And alhamdulillah, the urge has left as well. Like even the thought of smoking now knocks me sick. And if I've ever been around like some of the old friends that I used to hang about, or like my brother or anything, they all still smoke, and the smell of it just makes me feel uneasy. Like I know if I ever touched it again, I go absolutely underpants.
That's the reason that weed is hard to quit for a lot of drugs and substances. They're physiologically addicting, but weed is psychologically addicting, and it's a very difficult thing to break that pattern.
Well, we always used to go on about that as well. We were like, no, weed's not even addictive, and it was
I could quit whenever I want.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, right,
I could stop tomorrow. Then why don't you stop? Oh, because I don't need to stop.
I don't want to. I don't want to. It's cool.
I'm choosing to. I want to. I don't need weed. All right. And then why don't you go a week without it? That's when you know you're hooked.
Yeah. And so alhamdulillah, that's just not part of my life at all anymore, and I don't want it to be. But it was for like, but by the time I'd quit, at that point I had been smoking weed most of my life than I had not been. So I think I quit when I was like 25 or something. So I'd been smoking weed for like 13 years, and there'd been 12 years of my life where I hadn't. So, at that point it was like, I'd gone past this threshold. It was like, that's a long time to smoke weed. I don't want to be an old man going on about ganja.
How bad was your anxieties and all that?
Pretty bad. Like, I had severe anxiety. So they did this test thing on me, where they ask you questions and you go and you speak to professionals and that. And then like they have this graph or this thing, and it's like from 0 to 10, you're a 9. I was like, okay, that sounds pretty bad. So yeah, I was super, super, super severely anxious all the time, and I still am, like, to a degree. I always feel anxious, and it's never really left me. But it's not as extreme, or it's not as severe as it used to be. But I think the weed probably really played a huge part.
Exacerbated it,
Yeah.
or did it take it away?
Well, it was a form of escapism. So it was a method of avoiding certain things in life. It made me very complacent and lazy, and the sort of behaviors that I'd associated with it were just like I'd sort of lose myself a bit, and it was a way of just getting me to relax, and this was how I would relax. And if I wanted to relax, if I needed to relax, that's how I would do it. When I started studying, the first year that I was studying, I was still doing it. And I remember I used to I'd finished class, and I used to study in the city centre, so I had to mission for like an hour to get home, going on I'd walk for half an hour and then get a tram, and then that'd take me to my gaff. And I remember even just on my way home being so anxious, thinking I need to go home, I need to ring my drug dealer. That makes me anxious because they were always so dodgy. They'd always say yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and then they'd be there 10 hours later, and then always worrying about whether or not they were going to sell you short. So I always had to get anxious to make sure that it weighed what it was supposed to weigh, and then trying to split it and map the evening out, and that whole process just used to make me anxious. And I remember power walking home because I needed to get back, and that I needed to relax. And that was the way I would do it.
It's a whole different lifestyle, yeah?
Yeah, subhanAllah. And then just finding out you got a daughter on the way was left that, knocked it on the head, and then I chilled out. It just helped me so much, leaving that behind, and getting some responsibility, becoming an adult, having something that is utterly dependent upon you. Obviously it doesn't work for everyone. I think some people, my dad being a good example of that didn't seem to help him sort of get on track, I guess. But yeah, for me, it was just, that was a key moment in my life.
It was enough is enough, kind of like a wake-up call.
Yeah.
What's a parallel you can depict between nihilism and substances, if there's any?
So there can be. So the thing is with nihilism is when someone's experiencing it.
What is nihilism for a lot of people? Because a lot of viewers, there's what is that term?
So nihilism is, in short, it's just the idea that life and existence and the cosmos as a whole, everything, is utterly meaningless and insignificant. And you get a sense of this at some point, I think, in your life. Everyone does. When you are sort of embedded in a hedonistic lifestyle of sorts, usually in teenage years, you become obsessed with certain things: women, money, cars, clothes, power, this, that, and the other. And you sort of just dive into it, and you keep trying to sort of achieve this Disney prince sort of, the happy ending sort of life, and you're I need to become rich, I need to do this, I need to have, I need people to respect me or whatever, and so you try to pursue a lifestyle, and you're seeking these pleasures, but then eventually they just you're seeking them, but they're not really even giving you any pleasure anymore. Not only that, they're even causing you pain, some of these things. And when you do engage in them, you've got this huge urge to engage in it, because of this hyper desire. But then when you attain it, there's it feels hollow. It feels like it didn't live up to the hype. It feels empty. And when your life revolves around these type of things, life begins to start to feel empty as well. And you see the uselessness of it, or you start to see the falsity in that kind of life. You see, this isn't why I'm here. This isn't what life is about. This is stupid. This is silly. And it, some people don't see that, and they get sort of stuck in it. and then you need to sort of deal with some sort of escapism. Now, oddly enough, some people will just sort of engage in the same sort of behaviors that cause the feelings, and then they just get stuck in this nasty feedback loop where they keep sort of
they get deeper into it, yeah,
deeper and deeper and deeper into the different avenues or holes, be that with women or drugs or alcohol or computer games or the online world or whatever it is. There's many different avenues, but it's a form of escapism that you recognize that the universe is meaningless, or empty, void of significance. So you try to escape it and you try to jump into something in order to avoid that.
Is there a line though between consciously realizing that life is meaningless and unconsciously just living in that way, or is it kind of blurred and just a mesh?
Repeat the question.
So I'm saying, for someone who's like a nihilist, just like losing and living in that lifestyle, is there this mental, I guess, separation between a conscious understanding that, okay, life is meaningless, and the unconscious, I guess, presence of being in that state?
Okay, good question.
Or does it just mesh?
So I think for the majority of people, it's not a conscious decision. It's just like a smell. It's in the air. It's just something you're feeling the presence of, and you can be aware of it, but it's quite terrifying. And so you want to avoid it. But it's not like, oh, I'm a nihilist. People half the time don't even know what the word means. And it's not necessarily a conversation they'll even have unless they're in one of the lowest moments.
Or in therapy or something.
Yeah, exactly. But so they'll just avoid it, and they'll try to stay positive. And if you ever try to start to have serious conversations, like I was always a bit of a quote unquote a buzzkill, I guess, sometimes, where like everyone would be having this particular sort of night where they're just, small talk or getting drunk and talking silly about random things. And then I'd be like wanting to talk about death or like, impending doom or
like dark.
Some death in the sense of like, well, life, what's the meaning of life, or conspiracy theories, like what was this, what's going on here? And I don't know, maybe because I'd sort of experienced quite a lot of death growing up, I was already really exposed to it, and it didn't strike me as strange or as it struck me as an important subject. And it was always weird that people weren't as willing to talk about these things, or as interested to talk about these things as I was. But yeah, I think that either people are recognizing it, because as far as I see it, nihilism is sort of a societal problem at the moment. It's not like just a philosophy people are picking. It's a necessary consequence of a particular set of values. And at the moment in Western society, the values are very particular, and they sort of accentuate this feeling of nihilism. And you've got this pervading feeling, or this like dark cloud that's above everyone, and they're just sort of trying to escape it, because people generally in Western society don't believe anymore, or they don't act like they believe, at least. And that life has become incredibly animalistic to a certain degree. That is, there's just a focus on dunya-ish things, focus on pleasure seeking, and this is what causes nihilism. It's like ultimately its foundation, the universe and everything in it is it's just dead matter. There's no consciousness at the bottom of it, and if there's no consciousness and there's nothing being aimed at, it's random, it's pointless, it's just ups and downs, and you're seeing good people getting trodden on and hurt, and you're seeing bad people get all these things you want. Bad people have got the money, they've got this, they've got that.
I see what you mean now, bro. It's depressing even hearing it, so I can imagine how it is for you just talking about it.
So it's not like fun, so to speak, to study. It just feels really necessary. But like, I don't know, I've always been weird. So that there's the experience is like, the analogies I've always made, there's certain moments in my life where I've had this experience of something, and the feeling that I've had in these moments is analogous to sort of a full realization of what nihilism is, or the experience of it. And so there was one time we'd done this drug called, it was, we just bought seeds, like if you plant them they grow and they turn into flowers, but they were a particular kind of seed that they had this sort of psychedelic effect.
So psychoactive, yeah.
And we'd crush them, and then we'd like sieve this stuff out of the middle of it, and then we'd put it in, and we'd make a little bomb out of it and drop it.
You guys really did something that you don't know what it is.
Well, we knew it was a seed. Like it was like
that's not enough information for me.
No, I'd looked into it a bit. Like we were reading about it, and it's like I was reading experiences of what people have had.
What did you read?
Just people's accounts of their experiences.
No, I'm saying like what were they, like briefly? Just like, were they good? Were they bad? Was it something like DMT where it was like be really cautious?
Yeah, it was like varied. It was up and down. There was many different kinds of experiences. So a lot of people had like really good experiences, and a lot of people had a really bad one. And I'm like hypersensitive to these kind of things. And even like whenever I took anything, I was always like the first one to be affected by it, and it would always like hit me way more than it hit everyone else. And so we took these things called seeds. I can't even remember what they were called. Probably best I don't tell you what they are anyway. But and it was really weird, and I had this sort of mad experience of the world being very, very present, and like everything was extra sensitive. So like I started washing my hands, and then I was like, even now I can remember the experience. I remember how soft the soap was. And so I just poured loads of soap onto my hands, and I was just in my mate's bathroom, just experiencing the softness of soap. And then we were like, me and him were running up and down the stairs, and then he put dubstep on or something, and it was like wah, 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 wah. And I was laying in his bed, and it felt like I was like on clouds. And so I go really up, and then I always come crashing. So I always felt like whenever I did anything like this, I always had this really, really high up. And then it always went down to this like really dark, scary place. And the second time I took it, I fell into a black hole. This is the only way I can explain it. It's like I would have loads of energy out of nowhere. And so I'd run around, and we were like screaming out of the windows and like powering up like Super Saiyans. And then all my energy I would lose it, and I would feel utterly powerless. And I would just sink to the floor, and I'd like lost control of my body. Like really, I lost it. Like I was just lay on the floor, and then I couldn't keep my eyes open. And then all that was left of me was my heartbeat, and I was sure I was going to die. Like I felt like any moment now I'm going to die, and I was in a severe state of panic, but I couldn't do anything. Like I was fully conscious, like I was there. I was lay on the floor. I couldn't open my eyes. The world was dark, and like it wasn't a dream. I wasn't asleep. Like I was there, and then like it felt like I had to try and crawl out of this hole, and then like force myself to open my eyes. And I was trying to like ask my friends for help, and they were just like sat down, just talking, trying not to freak me out by acting normal, while I was going to some dark place. And that feeling of utter terror, of darkness, of nothing, of just a heartbeat, being on my own, feeling utterly powerless, and despite having these people around me, feeling like there was light years between us, and being ultimately alone. That was nihilism. That was like just sheer terror. And because everything else seems like, why am I doing these things? Like, why? Who cares about that? Who cares about this? Like, when it came to like the moment of feeling like you were going to die, like things start to sort of fall into perspective a bit. But that's what nihilism is like. It's like realizing you're you're a finite being, that death is coming. Every breath is one breath closer to the last. Every heartbeat is one beat close. It's really depressing. As you can tell, it's
no, listen, man, we started this whole jinn series about it, right? A lot of people don't, we're not experts, but it's essentially your ruh, like your soul. It's kind of like this is our theory again, and our bodies, like our physical bodies, right, where we are right now, our soul is kind of interwoven into it, and that's the way it should be. That's the way Allah designed us to be. When you do these drugs and it lowers your hijab, and you're more vulnerable to a lot of things that are from the unseen, right? Yeah. It just creates this separation from, you know, your ruh and your physical body. Now, it's all fun, feels nice, but what if you can't come back? What if you don't, when you do come back, you're not the same?
Yeah. Well, these things definitely change you. Like, I know, like, whenever I did these things, that they were always, it was terrifying. I did it more than once. I don't know why. Well, no, I do know why. Because it in a way, it made you really, really take life seriously. And like, every time I did it, it was always so exhausting. Like, I couldn't, like, if I ever did it, it was once every couple of years. And no problem. Once every couple of years. And it was always hyper significant, but hyper terrifying. And now the thing is it's funny you mentioned jinn as well, because I have theories about this, and it relates as well to things like the soul, and it also relates to these things about DMT. So maybe we can go into that, inshallah. But it's I was doing it because I was trying to find something. I was in search of something, and it was clear that whatever I was sort of focused on was empty. It was hollow. There was nothing to it. But there was always this sense of something significant in place, and you could always see it, but it was never in worldly pursuits. It was never in the drugs. It was never in the women. It was never in the alcohol. It was always, everything always felt like it had. It was weird because there's this conflict. You've got this experience of the world as meaningless when you're looking at the world in and of itself, but then simultaneously there's always this sense of significance. There's always this sense of plan, and it was really, really hard to describe, but I always felt watched over. Like, I always felt like when I was traveling, man, I got into some weird predicaments. Like, crazy things were happening, and like, I was like, I should have died then. Like, that how on earth? Like, yeah, subhanAllah, there was just too many accounts of things happening where it was like that should have ended very, very badly. I have no idea how I got out of that. But I always felt like there was something protecting me, or something watching over me. It was always this weird sense.
Like Allah or jinn?
I don't know. It felt like a good thing. It felt like a good presence protecting me. Not evil. But I also had this sort of sense of evil as well somewhere, but it was distinct. They weren't the same thing. There was like this one thing trying to call me in one way, and this other thing trying to call me.
What if it was the same thing, but like a different thing? What I'm trying to say is, what if it's not like good or bad? What if it just, they're all bad, but some could be good? You know what I mean?
Yeah, possibly. Because this ties into jinn, because jinn have a will, so some of them could be bad. Some
right, and they don't want you to catch on to how they are.
Yeah, exactly. But so the nihilism thing, sort of linking it back to the original question, that experience when I was in these like dark places, it was terrifying. And I had experiences when I wasn't taking something which was similar to that. So I went scuba diving at night, and I was in the ocean, and my torch wasn't working, and I was just alone everyone was sort of swimming. And I remember I turned out and I looked into the darkness of the ocean, and then I was terrified. I was like, I can't see like my hand in front of my face. It's that dark. There could be a shark like right in front of me, and I'd have no idea until it bit me. And it was just pure fear. And then there's one part of the body telling you to run or swim and get out and go. And then there's another part of me that's sort of just watching me panic and being like, no, stay. Like I don't know, I'm weird. I wanted to experience that fear and let myself experience it, and then force myself to stay and to keep experiencing it. And it wasn't something that was going away. It was there, but then there was this other part of myself that wanted to sort of stay composed while going through that. And I had another experience like that when I was in a graveyard. I used to go walk around in graveyards at night, and I had a dog at the time, and I liked the night because everyone was asleep, and there's a sense of pure silence and bliss and peace at night, especially in graveyards. And then I just got this sense that there was something behind me, and I was terrified. And then it was like, run. You need to run out of the graveyard. It's dark. There's no light. It's pitch black. There's a monster. It's going to eat your face. And so there's this part of me wanting to run, and then there's another part wanting me to turn around and look to check. And then there was another part of me that was like, no, just stand still.
Yeah.
Don't run. Don't turn around. Just submit to whatever's going on. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And then so I just stood there, and I was just sort of like watching my fear and letting it overcome me. And I'd had lots of these experiences of like utter fear and of sort of recognition of my mortality, that death was possible at any moment. And that I need to take life seriously. And eventually obviously when I went traveling, and I was the traveling wasn't so much going to places, it was running away from, the life that I was living. And I wanted to see what different ways of living there were. So like I said, I stayed with monks. I was looking into Buddhism. And then I met a lot of atheists. I met a lot of like new age hippie types. So I was talking to all of them. I was looking into like the modern forms of this new age religion. So there was a particular author that I really liked. It was called Ram Dass. And so I was taking these things seriously. I was trying to figure out, is there any truth in them? And the more, obviously, in Islam was a part of that as well. And so I was reading the Quran. I read it, I think, 2 times front to back before I'd actually took my Shahada. I was looking into the life of the Prophet. I was looking into all these arguments. I was watching a lot of YouTube. So I was probably watching, this was a long time ago now. I can guarantee that EF Dawah and Speaker's Corner and that were all a part of that. And it was just engaging with these seriously. And I think these moments of the fear of death, is what is going to take place after death. Is it really nothing? Am I willing to really put all of my money on the fact that there's nothing after life?
Right.
Do I really believe that? Because there was a point in my life where I did, but it was like, but do you though? Why do you believe that? And so I had to start like asking these questions. What is it that makes me think atheism is true? What is it that makes me think that that there isn't necessarily a God out there? And life was quite chaotic. So I'd like have these experiences, like I mentioned before, where it's like I had this sense of some sort of super significance, but then they would sort of drift, and then I would move back into this sort of agnostic / atheistic state, and it was fluxing certain experiences, and I'd become more sort of open to this idea, and then it would drift away, and it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it says it in the Quran, like when you're on the ship and the storm comes, all of a sudden everyone's a believer again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then
once it's done.
Yeah, once it's done, you fall back into forgetfulness. And like I was reading the Quran, and it's like I kept reading and I kept seeing myself in it. It was like, and then I was reading more and I was seeing everyone around me in it, and then I was starting to see that there's wisdom in this. Like I know if I stop these type of behaviors, I know this is where contentment lies. I know this is where peace will reside. Like in submission to a lot of the things that are being said here. And there were parallels. So like when I was in the Buddhist temple, they did things like pray 5 times a day as well, funnily enough. And they did sujood, so they, you know, even go into prostration. But they had these big gold statues that were doing it towards of men, and I didn't get that. And I'd speak to them, and there was these like, everywhere. Whenever I was talking to people, there was always these like common themes, these common patterns. And when I was really young, I was really into alien conspiracy theory stuff. And what had happened is, independently of religion, while I was an atheist, the way I'd come to understand or conceptualize aliens was as not extraterrestrial, but as like extra dimensional beings. Now this touches, have you ever heard of flatlanders?
I heard of flat earthers.
No, nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. It's this book, Flatland by Edwin A. Abbott, and it's subtitle a romance of many dimensions. Now, in this book, it talks about a flat land, like it's literally a land that's 2-dimensional, so it's not a 3D place. And there's little 2D creatures that live in flatland. So there's little squares, there's little triangles, there's little circles, and they live in a flat world. They have no up or down. They only have forward, backwards, left, and right. And they live in this flat world, and that's all they know. They don't know anything else. But then this 3-dimensional creature comes along and starts talking to one of them. So you can see on the cover, you've got a little flat square man, and then you've got like a sphere here poking through his world.
That's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, so it's well, it's not. They've never experienced these things necessarily, and it comes over. It starts talking to one of the little flat creatures, and it hears it, but it hears it as if it's coming from inside of its own head, because he's talking from above. So like, you know how when me and you were talking, we can only see the outside of us. I can't see your heart pumping. I can't see your lungs breathing in or out. I can't see your brain. All of these things are concealed by your skin. Now in flatland, the same thing applies. When 2 flat creatures are seeing each other, they only see the outside, the edge, and then all of the organs are on the inside of the shape. So like the heart would be inside and the brain and everything. But when the 3D creature is above them, talking to them, it's talking to their insides. And so they hear it as if it's coming from inside their own heads. So they hear these voices and they're saying, "Where are you?" He says, "I'm above you." And then they say, what do you mean above? Where's above? They say, "Show yourself." And so the 3D creature lowers himself and he goes into their world, which you see there. And what happens is they experience this dot appear in front of them as if out of nowhere. And then it grows and grows as the circle, as the sphere goes in. Obviously, the closer it gets to the center, the bigger the shape is in that plane. And so you've got this thing appears out of nowhere and then grows. And then as it leaves again, it shrinks and shrinks until it disappears. And they say, "Where did you go? Like how?" And then he's like, "Well, the world is more complicated than you think. It's not just forward, back, left, and right. There's an up and a down as well." And he says, "Show me this up." So the 3-dimensional creature takes the 2-dimensional creature and he takes him up, and he looks down at his world in a completely unique way for the first time. He sees inside of people. So he's looking down and he can see not just people's skins. He can see the bodies inside of them. He can see their hearts beating. He can see their lungs. He can see the brains. He sees inside of his neighbor's house and outside of it at the same time. He sees what's in his neighbor's safe. Like he sees everything, and he's never experienced the world like this before. And then the 3D creature drops him back, and in front of his friends, and he just appears in front of his friends as if out of nowhere. And they say, "Well, how did you do that? You've just appeared out of thin air." He says, "I've just been up." And then they're like, "What do you mean up?" And then he's got to try and like explain to them where he's been, what this place is. But they have, like he did before he went up, no way of like really understanding what's gone on.
Conceptualizing even, yeah.
No, I was thinking of aliens in this way. So I was thinking of aliens, if they exist. This was prior to like becoming a theist. I was thinking of because I was watching even Carl Sagan videos. Carl Sagan does a video on this about when he's talking about extra dimensions, and he makes reference to this book, and he's talking about it, and it made sense to me. It's like, well, if there is aliens, surely it's much more likely that they'd be extra dimensional than extraterrestrial, because stars are just too far away.
Yeah,
like
100%.
And it just, if we're experiencing all of these things, and so my idea of alien became this extra dimensional being that could move between dimensions, or was an extra dimensional thing like the circle. And I was like, so you know when you hear voices in your head, when I was an atheist, I just assumed every voice in my head was mine. But it was, and then I started asking the question, well, how do I know? Like, imagine Flatlanders is real. We're the 2D creatures, and there's 3D creatures. But obviously, we're 3-dimensional. So the 3D creatures in the analogy, they'd be 4-dimensional. So, and they'd be saying, no, the world's not just up, down, left, right, forward, and backwards. There's another direction, and whatever he referred to that as.
And Allah writes in the Quran that, you know, for jinn, they see you from where you don't see them.
You can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And bro, and this is funny because all these things started clicking in place after. So I was thinking of aliens in this sort of way as extra dimensional beings. And then I was thinking about, like, so what are angels? What are demons? What's all this? And then it started to just, the more I looked into it, and the more it felt like it was just a semantics issue. Like they were all the same thing. Like when people are talking about angels and demons, I was just being pedantic in just wanting to call them aliens. And it's like, well, you know, back in the day when people would see these things and whatever it is that's going on, things appearing out of nowhere in front of them, and then going away. And when you're looking at, when I was in the Buddhist temple as well, they had similar experiences. They were talking about this species of people that we have this connection with.
Really?
Something like that. And they lived in another world. And the highest monk that lived in this temple, he said he could travel, and he'd go there and he'd have councils with them. And they were telling me all about this mad stuff. And the more I was looking into it, I was looking into that. And then I was reading about Islam, and I was reading about that what you just said there. They see you from where you cannot see them. And so then I just started, like, things just started clicking in place. And the more I was looking into jinn, the more it felt like jinn here is what I've been calling aliens, and what the Christians have been calling demons. And like it just, like, subhanAllah, all of that started clicking in place. And then like certain experiences started happening as well, where I was starting to realize how there must be more to this world than I think. Like, I had a conversation with my family, and we were talking about what's your earliest memory, and we were talking about this on an island.
Wait, sorry, repeat that. What you were talking about? What?
What's your earliest memory? So it was a conversation I was having, and we were in the middle of a road waiting to the lights to turn so we could cross, and we were on our own, isolated. We went about shopping. 4 or 5 hours later, we went for something to eat, and we'd not been speaking about this for like 4 or 5 hours, and we were on our own when we were talking about it. And we sat down eating, and the waitress has gone to the table behind us, and the guy started talking to her, and he said to her, "What's your earliest memory?" And bro, it just sent my head west. I was like, and because I was really thinking about all this Flatlander stuff, I was like, what if he has seen my memory or my thought about that question? How would he be able to distinguish that from his own thoughts? There would be no way. He would have to see that thing would pop into his head. He would just assume, oh, I've just had an idea. But if the world is more complex than that, and this is a really common experience that people have a lot. You're thinking about someone and then they ring you, like, too quick for it to be a coincidence. Like, and they're like, oh yeah, I was just thinking about you. I was like, bro, I was just thinking about you. That's weird. Or you're thinking about someone and you walk around the corner and then they're there. Like, there was just all of these things. And it was just, I was getting closer and closer to this notion of the unseen. And yeah, so the more I was looking into it, the more and more I was becoming convinced of the Islamic paradigm in particular. Because even the Islamic paradigm, it recognizes that there is overlap, and that all these other cultures, all these other religions, they have a root in an original monotheism, but that they developed and went astray as time went on. And I was seeing these links, I was seeing these connections, and I was reading the Quran, and it was speaking to me. And I couldn't shake the significance of it. Like, I couldn't shake this feeling that all of this is true. And, you know, that the arguments that I was looking into, you know, about Allah, the existence of God, about Allah being one, about Tawheed, about, you know, prophethood, about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about the companions. The more I was looking into all of this, the more I was convinced that all of this was true. And then, yeah, eventually it became a really inconvenient point where I had to take my shahada, despite it being like a really weird thing to want to have to do, because it just meant completely changing my life in many ways. And I wasn't too comfortable taking that leap a lot, because like I said, there was a lot of things I was really into at the time. And the idea of leaving those things behind were difficult. And then the idea of all these extra responsibilities were difficult as well. But yeah, like all of these things were just starting to click in place. So it was like the bad habits that I was doing, it was starting to become quite clear that I should stop them. These notions of alien or these other things, this notion of God, all of this was starting to all click in place. And it was clicking in place in relation to every other thing that I've been looking into. And it was just this mad experience of like, you know, the jigsaw puzzle sort of coming into completion, and like the picture is clear now. You can see what it is. Yeah, subhanAllah, it was mad.
So I got two things. One,
yeah,
not really relevant. Second one's relevant though. But the first one, how did you find our channel?
I was watching. So how do you pronounce the brother's name? Is it Anghel? So I remember when, I don't even know, I can't remember who. I remember someone was sharing the video of him talking about cold showers. He did
I
a
thought
video.
you were talking about his revert video that like Ayura and Sapiens.
No. This was before he reverted. He was doing a video about cold showers.
What I've learned 4 years or something like that.
Yeah. And I know cold showers are sick. I just really struggle taking them in England. I used to take them all the time when I was traveling, but that was easy because it was boiling hot over there. And I know if I could only get myself to take cold showers in the morning, that I know it'd have a huge positive impact. And so I was watching that video about that, and it was like, I need to do that. I still haven't. But yeah, so I do need to. And then after that, I heard he took his shahada. And then there was another channel called Debating Truth with Jan.
Yeah.
And Angel had an interview on there with that brother. Jan. I said Jan. I think it's pronounced Jan.
Yeah.
And so he had a huge conversation on there. And so I was listening to that. And then from there, I found out that he'd started a podcast with you and brother Rami. And so I started watching that as well. And I've not seen every episode, but I was drifting in and out. And then I saw you did an interview with a friend of mine, Fareed. So I was watching that one. And in the end, I just became more and more familiar with you. And so I was watching it a bit more. So that's how I came across the Three Muslims podcast.
So you're like a day one in a way, OG.
Kind of, because I remember when I came across you maybe had a couple of thousand subs, but you zoomed to like 10K in absolutely no time whatsoever. SubhanAllah.
All good from Allah. I mean, likewise. I think I remember what, like, again, when I see something, I don't really forget it, right? So I saw your face, and it was like your YouTube pic. I think it said Pondering Soul, and
yeah, it's just me with a beard, like.
Yeah, and it was you in a live stream. I believe it was like our first live stream. It was like really throwback. I'm talking like maybe December or January. It was a while ago. And I remember seeing you, and I was like, And a lot of people were commenting like, I'm from Pondering Soul. I'm from Pondering Soul. Or I'm sent from Pondering Soul. And then I clicked on your thing. I think you shared like a live stream or like a video of ours. And that's when I found you and started going through your content.
Oh, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
So when was that? It was December, did you say? Or?
December. It was very early on because we started December 11th.
Yeah,
Six
subhanAllah,
months
wasn't that
ago.
long ago.
Yeah.
Mashallah, 10K is half a year, man.
I mean, it's bro. I told.
Oh, we lost your signal.
And I've been.
We lost you for a second there.
Okay.
And again. Oh, you're back. You keep cutting out.
Could you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Perfect. I'm on data. Basically what happened, bro, is I knew Anghel. I knew Rami. I've been speaking to Anghel. Again, bro, it's Jahiliya. I don't want to get too into that, but I
Yeah.
think it was sometime around 20. It was definitely 2019. I brought up the fact he was kind of iffy. 2020, we went to Iceland and we were cooking dinner one day because it was at an Airbnb. And I was just basically telling him about, bro, you know how we've been searching, and basically when you there's like so much new age stuff, right? There's like DMT entities, there's like what you like spirits and kundalini and all this nonsense, bro. But I was like, bro, I think you can stop looking. I think I found it. He's like, what? I'm like, oh, bro, I think it's Islam. And like, I don't know, like maybe like to people it's like, oh, you were born into it, you might be biased, right? And I was like, bro, just read the Quran. Like I'm telling you, like this is it.
It's
Like
the worst.
it just reaffirmed everything I already thought, you know?
Because the thing is something has to be true. Now, like say, for example, you could say to me, I was born in an atheist society. It's like, well, you know, what if you were just atheist because you were born into an atheist society? Like that, none of that matters. That doesn't declare the truth or falsity of anything because you were born into it. If it is true, whether you were born into it is secondary. You've got to ask yourself then, it's like, well, like what? So even if it is true, you want me to reject it because I happen to have been born into it? Right? That don't make no sense.
Facts. That's true, man. A lot of people don't see it that way, though. However, it's pretty unfortunate. Um, when I kind of I felt that inclination to tell him, like a brother, he was genuinely like, if you're talking about like top 5 people I'm closest to, or even top 3, it was him. So I naturally told him that, and he was like, we talked about it. He told me how he's Puerto Rican, right? So he's like, when he was back in Puerto Rico, or I think it was his grandfather he was talking to, and his grandfather's like, no man, there has to be a God. We were just talking about Islam here and there, nothing crazy. But I got stronger into my deen in 2020. See, COVID, Ramadan, the first Ramadan in 2020, that was my year, specifically that month. I really increased in my iman, alhamdulillah. And I think that was really when I took a turning point, right? So anyway, it was after that he really saw a change in me, along with a lot of people. And I was like, I just felt more of a calling. Bro, you don't get on Deen and then want to just abandon your friends and then start like new friends. You want to at least try to see if you could guide them, try to like give them some type of insight. And then it's like, okay, after that, you've done your job. If they're not gonna budge, it is what it is. So I kind of told him, I was like, hey man, this is it. He had a lot of questions, alhamdulillah. It was very natural. Do you get me? It was like he had that inclination too. He had a lot of experiences with salah, not salah, sorry, with meditation, and he just felt guided to Islam. It was a very passive experience for him. It wasn't so passive for me. For him, it was like he was guided. He just like kept seeing the Quran in his shelf. Like he felt that calling, repeating numbers. You get what I mean? So he just kept feeling it and he didn't resist it anymore. Exactly, patterns. And he just went into it. And he just felt it. He felt waves in his body, in his spine. He had an intense experience and he had a lot of questions. A lot of people, once they're at this stage, they still have questions. What about this common thing? What about that? What about this in some David Wood video? What about this argument or this something about the conduct of the Prophet Sallallahu anything? And then alhamdulillah, we had a few discussions. I told him, I was like, bro, we're gonna talk like here and there every now and then. We started talking like I think 4, 5, 6 hours every night consecutively at some point. And it was at that point I was like, there's no way like he's not after all this, right? And then at the end of it, he was ready to do a shahada. I think he was kind of delaying it, but I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not gonna say it was the right decision. I'm also not gonna say it's the wrong decision because again, we're still here where we are today, alhamdulillah. But I was like, bro, what if you want to like be the perfect Muslim, because he was saying typical stuff that most of my friends said before reverting, like, oh, I want to at least finish the Quran. Bro, every time I heard that, I was like, what are you gonna do after read Sahih Bukhari? Or like, it doesn't end, bro. Right. So it's like if
Yeah.
you feel it, you could become learned, but it's like that line of becoming where you are, you're never gonna get there. So if you really feel it, just you never know what's gonna happen, right? So it's err on the side of caution. So he was like, all right, bet I'm ready. He became Muslim, alhamdulillah. This was in October of last year. And as soon as we were done, last year, I went to a trip to the mountains with Rami, right? This is again, at this point they still don't know each other, because when you have friends, your friends might not necessarily know each other, right?
Yeah.
So me and Rami were like, we should start a podcast about Islam, but like more like modern day, right? And we never really pursued it or entertained it. It was just like a something we just put out into the universe. Now, after he became Muslim, I introduced him to Rami, because Rami has more knowledge about the deen than me, and I was kind of telling them to link up, and I just threw it out there, man. I was like, yo, we should start a podcast. And Anghel told me this. I remember. He's like, after speaking with Rami, it just goes to show how far I have to go and how much I don't know anything about Islam, at least compared to him. So because of that, I think we should wait. And I'm like, that's a good point, because you don't want to start giving dawah and trying to, guide people to Islam if you don't know much. But at the same time, it's like, when is it time? So why not just start?
Well, I'll give you my sort of perception of your podcast. So for me, you've got a nice dynamic. So, and it looks as if we're sort of going on this journey with Anghel, like in the process of learning and discovering, and with you two brothers as well. And, I think you bounce well off each other. So, alhamdulillah, I don't think it's a bad idea that you started it, because obviously you've all got your different perspectives, and Anghel, like being new into this, he's giving you the perspective of, well, I'd like to learn about this. Let's do something on it. Rami, if he has his connections with this, that, or whatever person, and yourself as well, you can obviously interact with that and explore these questions and get answers and go through that process of learning with him. So it's an interesting dynamic you've got going on. And
alhamdulillah.
I'm glad you started your podcast.
Yeah.
And didn't take his initial intuition on that.
Alhamdulillah. I told him, like, that instant, bro. I was like, bro, we're not gonna be like an Islamic podcast. We're gonna be a Muslim podcast. You get me? There's a difference. And it's like, and he's like, he got that. And I was like, let's just start, bro. Like, it is what it is. And then alhamdulillah, we didn't miss a single week. I think consistency is the name of the game. I already told them, I was like, this is what we gotta do. We did commit to one episode a week, but we didn't really like pick things up until we did 2 episodes a week. And now we're doing 3 to 5 uploads a week.
So it's mashallah. So I am terrible with organization.
Same
here. You don't get that impression, bro, because it was you and Anghels' videos as well from his. He's got his own channel, hasn't he?
Yeah, bro. I'm literally no different than anyone terrible. Like, you can't see my desktop right now. I use 4 different apps to just make the thumbnails, because I don't know anything. I don't know ish about graphic design or anything. I'm a med student, bro. I have no experience with like any technical. I'm really bad at technology too. So video editing, I didn't even know what iMovie was. So the story was, I think, of iMovie or editing.
Okay.
iMovie is like the app.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said IMV. I was like, I don't know what IMV is.
So I think Rami was, I don't mean to throw Rami under the bus, but it's a funny story. Rami wanted to edit our first video, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the thumbnails. I'm gonna do all the audio streaming platforms, Patreon, all that. Anghel is gonna try to, post a bit more, market it a little more, whatever. Rami knows more editing than all of us, right? Plus, when we're playing Call of Duty, bro, me and Anghel are just, doing normal people stuff. This man's using keyboard and mouse. So if you're a keyboard and mouse guy, you can edit the videos, right? So it was fair enough. And apparently our little short 45-minute podcast took him, I think, 10 to 20 hours to just export. And I think his laptop kept freezing or something was happening. Bro, it was at that time, I was like, nah, bro, this is not gonna work out. Like, we can't do this every week. This is not how it's supposed to be. Because the actual file is like nothing if you can't edit it in, right? So I got iMovie on my phone, bro. We figured some stuff out, and we just learned things along the way. I still use 4 different apps for the thumbnails. Could I do it in one? Yeah, but
Listen,
for
bro.
me, it's more like I figure out like a self-taught way of doing something, and it's like I just stick with it. I don't want to like. Is there an easy way? Perhaps, but I'm kind of old-fashioned like that. Like I do online coaching too, right, for fitness, and a lot of my clients told me you should get Calendly, right? Because Calendly is like where you can book and it's all automated. And then for me, I'm like, bro, I use my notes, like my iPhone notes app, and I literally put like day to day. And they're like, bro, how do you do that? I'm like, I could just erase it, add things. And they're like, bro, wouldn't you want Calendly? I downloaded Calendly, bro. To me, it just seems a little more complicated than just
Well,
doing
that's
it
the
myself.
thing, when you get used to your own patterns and that, like stepping outside of that, it's a lot more effort sometimes.
100%, 100%.
But like I was gonna suggest just StreamYard, man. You need to get a StreamYard account.
We use StreamYard, yeah. We use it for streaming and reactions. We don't really use it for recording podcasts.
So you can set it up unlisted.
Oh yeah, like we can record only too with StreamYard. It's just we just like Zoom for that. I don't know why. We have both.
Okay. Mashallah.
Yeah, we use both. So our reaction videos are StreamYard. Our live streams are StreamYard too. And then our actual episodes like this, we use Zoom. But I wanted to quickly touch on, I got like 5-ish, but I'll quickly go over the theory that me and Anghel came up with. And this was through, I don't want to say like, again, we're not experts, we're not anything but just people trying to figure things out themselves, right? But this is our theory. We have a theory that all mental illnesses, right, give or take, I don't want to say like flipping Alzheimer's with amyloid plaques in your brain. That's a physiological thing. That's not just psychological at that point, right? So I'm talking about most, psyche related psychological disease of the mind, not just like actual things. So things that are, I guess, unseen, they don't come up in brain scans. So anxiety, depression, mild schizoaffective symptoms, any type of bipolar, right? These are things that won't show per se, ADHD, right? So our theory is, and obviously like drugs sometimes decrease or increase these symptoms, right? So our theory is that all of these relate to energy, right? And this is something it's pretty unconventional to today. We talk about things in a very physical way. You need drugs, you need this prescription, right? So energy is just law of thermodynamics. It can't be created nor destroyed, only converted from one form to another. So if energy can't be created or destroyed, we have a very, I guess, abundant amount of energy that we carry within us as human beings, right? And the people that have these psychological symptoms, right, they just suffer, and they were just born with an excess of this energy. Now, this doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them, right? Because the only thing making you feel like there's something wrong with it is society over-diagnosing and over-categorizing these mental disorders, right? They actually don't really exist in our opinion. But anyway, we're just born with an excess amount of energy. You got ADHD, that's all it is. Your reticular activating system, that's the thing in your brain. It's just hyperactive, right? Yeah. So we have a severely high excess amount of energy that we're not using, because today, the modern, I guess, man, I hate to say it, but it's what it is very sedentary. We live very normal, sedentary, repetitive, desk job, 9-to-5 lives. We don't really get up, right? We're just in our seats all day, and you're not using that energy. So what happens is this energy just keeps building up, kind of like if you have sexual energy building up, right? You're not married, you don't want to do haram with yourself, so you're gonna have a wet dream. If you're just angry and you're just not doing anything about it, you're not discharging this anger in a very mature and responsible manner, or working out or something like that, you're just gonna have a fit or rage or just flip on someone, right? So similarly, this energy that we have building inside us, when we're not using this energy, right, our body just does what our body normally does with anything. See, homeostasis or equilibrium, it doesn't care how we feel. If you want to puke, it doesn't ask you, Yusuf, you're in a podcast right now, or you're in a social setting, maybe you might not want to puke. It's just gonna make you want to puke, bro. Same with if you eat something that you shouldn't, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing with this energy. It doesn't care how you feel. It just knows efficiency. So the organ in our body that uses the most energy than anything else is the brain. So if the brain uses more energy than any other organ, our body just knows that if we shoot all this excess energy to our brain, then it could just get rid of it and use it up. And if it uses it, then you will be brought back to homeostatic or equilibrium levels of energy where it's not excess anymore. You're at least normal. Kind of like if you're too hot, it makes you sweat. So you just get rid of that heat. So in a very similar way, our theory is our body just wants to get rid of that energy. So essentially, it's an invitation to any of the viewers right now that you should get rid of the energy first before your body tries to take over in a way, or like have that wet dream analogy in a way. So it's like before it shoots all this offset and surge of energy into your brain. Because once it does that, it's too late. Then you get all these symptoms of like an overactive brain, of like brain fog, depression, anxiety, ADHD, all this. Furthermore, what burns more calories or energy, a positive thought or a negative thought? It's obviously a negative thought, right? So you combine that, your brain's like the most efficient machine once it gets into that feedback of using your brain to just get your energy levels at base, right? You got 2 days. If the first day you spend outside, right? Think of it like when you were with your shabab, with the boys, right? And you're just out here just doing whatever, living life out here, primitive, just like you're in the moment, you're present, you're living life, you're vibing, right? How do you feel when you come home? You're good. You're exhausted. You just go to sleep like a baby, right? Now compare this to a day where you're not doing that. You're in your bed thinking about nihilistic stuff. You think about the most depressing stuff. You're overthinking and negative thinking, right? I guarantee you this, you will feel more tired after the second day than you will after the first day. However, a lot of people think it's the opposite, right? They have this misconception that because I'm using more energy the first day, I'll feel more tired. Now, you will actually feel exhausted after the second day because you use your brain way more, right? So our invitation essentially is do that first before your body does that for you in a way. So this is literally what saved my and Anghels' life, because we used to, bro, our psychological symptoms weren't like anxiety or anything. We had like depersonalization and like derealization, like really bad symptoms, right? And what we started doing, normal stuff, bro, basketball, going outside for a jog, going outside for a walk. And we've been telling, alhamdulillah, a lot of people that reach out to us, and we tell them the same thing. They do it for a couple weeks, couple months max, and they feel normal again. And these are people that haven't felt normal for years, right? So any of you guys watching, if you do want any more info on what we're talking about, just hit us up on Insta or anything. But essentially, that's our theory, right? It's not obviously like anything. Like,
yeah, so this kind of links as well, funnily enough, you know, when I was talking about the Flatlanders stuff. So now in the story, the 2D creatures are only two-dimensional. Now, the more I was thinking about it, and when I was thinking about these other sort of experiences that I was talking to you about, the more I was starting to think maybe the reality of the story is the two-dimensional creatures are actually three-dimensional. And maybe their soul or their mind or whatever is the thing that grows up. But because it's their mind or their soul, and they see themselves as 2D creatures, they don't see that. And so making the analogy now over to the human being, the way I sort of conceptualize the human being and the relation between body and soul is this extra dimensional connection, in that there is another direction that's not up, down, left, right, blah, 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 blah. But there's an element of the body that grows in this other direction. And I sort of connected it to the brain as well, in the same way that you were saying that a lot of the energy that goes to your brain. And this is true. And it also helps to sort of make sense of this idea of these connections that you can get with people, where when you're thinking about them, they seem to know you're thinking about them and they can get in touch with you. Or when I mentioned the story about me talking about when's your earliest memory, like I was trying to visualize, and I couldn't get this story out of my head, how if my mind was growing in this other direction and he was to see my thought, how would he be able to recognize that as mine? There would be no way. And so when you were talking there about like this excess of energy, it sort of links there to this idea, because I do think, because you are right, if you have too much of something, if you don't do something to vent it, you know, like the same way with the pot, if you don't like let the steam out, the pot's going to explode. And in the same way, if you've got a lot of pent up anger, if you don't do something to vent that, like you say, if there's no prior movement consciously, then it's going to happen automatically. And so that'll be like an outburst,
and then you're not in control anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what you're saying there, it makes it, the only thing I would sort of maybe mention on, so you refer to energy within a closed system. It can neither be created or destroyed on top of what's in that system. Now, how do we relate that to Allah's power? Like, for example, we would say that creation obviously is created. That there's a sort of theological issue you just need to be a little bit careful of in regards to, if energy is itself, it's possible that it is created. It's just that we can't add anything to it.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. The question is how does that energy relate to Allah's power? Because Allah is obviously eternal, and His power is eternal with Him. And so that there is this eternal power, and energy is sometimes described as power as well. It's this, you know, the potential for something, for work. So there's just a thin line there that just, I guess we can think about it and maybe talk about it another time. But just I would be careful of referring to energy as something that, you know, the way you word it is important. But yeah, no, but what you're saying there, I would say,
and obviously, like, quick disclaimer, guys, if whatever I'm saying, it doesn't, I'm not intending to, you know, contradict any, you know, authentic hadith or like,
I don't think you will. Yeah, no, I never took
that. It's just the way our anecdotal, I guess, limited subjective experience to try to rationalize and like explain why things are the way they are. And like, it's, again, it can only, could it be placebo, who knows, but it's worked for us, it's worked for a lot of people, alhamdulillah. So
yeah, it's pragmatic in that sense, isn't it? So yeah, definitely. And but the thing is it does, what you say is something that sort of connects so a few ideas that I've been running around in my head. And I would, because the question here with regards to a lot of these things that we refer to as sort of mental illnesses is a question of what we consider to be normal or abnormal. And a lot of the time it's like, well, who's deciding what's abnormal exactly? And you know, especially with today's age and a obsession of sort of writing things down, categorizing it, putting everything into specific boxes and calling things like illnesses. Like my brother, he was someone who was, my mum was told he had ADHD, and they wanted to hop him up on Ritalin or whatever it is they give the kids. And when they told my mum, she was just like anti this sort of mentality completely. Alhamdulillah as well, because he is a normal guy. He was just someone who had, like you were describing there, like a lot of energy, and he needed ways of venting that, and the environment that he was in just wasn't allowing that.
ADHD is a hunter trait.
Yeah.
It's actually a gift, you know.
Yeah, but it
depends. Makes it seem like it's not.
Yeah, it's like if you put, like if you're judging a fish based on its ability to climb a tree,
or fly,
like, then
it would be a useless fish.
Then the person that's making the mistake here is the one trying to get something that's
that equivocation,
in its own particular nature would thrive, and then trying to take it out of that. Like the classroom is for a very particular kind of person. You can't expect everyone to thrive in that environment, and just simply because they don't thrive in that particular environment, it doesn't mean they're a failure or that there's something wrong with them. Half of the time it's just a case of like how we've understood how an upbringing should take place. And
bro, I feel that because me and Anha have ADHD, the amount of times we got, like, our parents called for just not being in our seat. You know.
So and the question here is like, is it really, really reasonable to expect every single child to have to go through this sort of factory line setting where you're like the only thing everyone has in common is their date of birth, their date of manufacture. They go through the years like a conveyor belt, and through this generalized method of study where all kids are just sort of treated the same. Everyone has to sit down in this classroom for X amount of days. Maybe there's one lesson a week, which we'll call physical education, which is an hour, if that, where they're doing something active. And then for the rest of it, we're expecting them to sit down, listen to people that are 50 to 60, 70% of the time boring, monotone voices, hate their job, in a state of repetitive, they're underpaid, they're overworked, you know, like, and what you want the kids to listen to this, man. Yeah. It's not strange to think that certain people with excess of energy here wouldn't thrive in that particular kind of environment. But then you get my brother, you put him into a rugby team, and he was an absolute monster, and he 100%. Was like charging through kids and breaking arms, and like he, like, in that environment he thrived, and in that other he didn't, and they couldn't really see that.
Yeah,
they put the problem on him and diagnosed it as an illness.
100%, man. I was just gonna add, actually, that whole cliche that we were brought up with, the guy who's stupid, you know, stuff for a lot, but they're like, he gets bad grades, but like he's good at gym. And then, you know, everyone's like, oh, it doesn't matter, you're good at gym. That's not what really matters. What really matters math and like science. It's like, what if that's just not for him, right? There's this whole standardized system of baseless, I guess, standards. It shouldn't relate to everyone, right? We live in a one-size-fits-all society.
Well, you know? It's because it's effective. Effective in the sense that it's like, if you had a system that was taking every individual into account and trying to play on the strengths of people, and didn't just look at them in terms of, oh, well, he was born in, you know, 1989 or 19 whatever, that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources in order to build a system that does that. It's a lot more effective in terms of costs and effort and energy to just make this sort of standardized system that treats children like products on a conveyor belt in a factory, because the whole system itself is built on this sort of you know, the industrial factory lines setting.
Easy to mass influence too.
Yeah, exactly. And so you just put things through this system and it comes out the other end, and you've got this like prepared individual, and those who don't happen to fit very well with that system are just sort of discarded to the sideline and considered ineffective or problematic or this and that.
Or deviant.
But it's like, you know, some of the, like, say for example, like my brother, if you'd have maybe found him an apprenticeship and put him into sort of like, you know, manual labor instead of through this high school system, and maybe obviously there's certain things that are important. So there was like an hour or 2 hours a day that was set aside for learning other subjects like maths and English or science. Maybe that would have been a lot more effective. Having him work hands-on, you know, getting sweaty, you know, using strength and, you know, having to engage with things rather than just like sit there and think about all these abstract notions and looking at writing on a whiteboard, but like getting his hands dirty, that maybe that'd have been like a million times. It's not like he's doing bad for himself now. Alhamdulillah, he's got his own like food business, and he's running, you know, he's doing things with his hands.
But see, exactly, yeah.
He's and he's thriving in it. He's doing really well. But yeah, and it's just, yeah, no, I agree with you.
His personality type, or just, I guess, just even his biochemistry, it's more like a kinesthetic learner. I mean, they're not the typical student, you know, in a classroom setting. It's not gonna work. They work better with like hands-on. There's people with ADHD. They comprise of the overwhelming amount of people in trades, right, and like skills. And there's people that are like more like better.
It starts to sound just like a personality type than a disease, isn't it? It's like
yeah, exactly, and that's all it is, bro. If Allah made us, you know, in all these different ways, it's not because, you know, I don't know, the society, they don't have Islam, right? So yeah. Any more thoughts on your mind before we wrap this one up?
So I just wanted to sort of bring it back. So we were talking about drugs before.
Perfect.
I was telling people about the experiences that I had on them, etc. So I just want to really like put emphasis on here. I don't want to make it seem like I was beautifying that at all, because it really isn't. It's an ugly scene, and it's one of the, I would say, major contributing factors to a lot of the problems that we're having on Earth today. And like Allah in the Quran, when he talks about alcohol, he says there may be some benefits in it, but its negatives outweigh. And he's talking here about intoxicants. He says there may be benefits, but its negatives outweigh the benefits, and so you should avoid it. Now, there is something similar here with things like drugs. So there are things that you can talk about that are quote unquote positive experiences, but the negatives completely outweigh them. The addictive behavior that sort of comes carried along with that, the negative consequences that it has on things like your personality, on the way you deal with the world, and the impacts it can have on the wider society.
In your wallet, bro.
Yeah, on your wallet, but on the community. So like my dad, him dabbling in drugs, one thing, took a huge toll on his wallet. He struggled to keep a job. He got into things like stealing in order to make up the funds that he didn't have because he was spending it on drugs. It had a massive impact on his family. It killed him in the end. His relationship with his wife, with his children, was affected heavily because of that. And I see the same thing happening with a lot of my friends. Not everyone's on heroin. Some people do cocaine, and you see a similar thing. It's money, it's addictive, it has these horrible impacts on things like their behavior, their personality. Things like cocaine cause people to become like egomaniacs almost, especially when they're on it. And then these other drugs, like even the ones that I was mentioning, weed, there's huge impacts, and there's always going to be the exception to the case. There's, you're going to get your Joe Rogans like, man, I'm a millionaire, look at me, I'm healthy and I go fighting and I do this and I smoke weed. It's like, yeah, but bro, you're like a tiny exception to the rule. Like the majority of people, when they're young and they get on this sort of stuff, they have increased chances of things like paranoia, schizophrenia, and things like this. And there seems to at least be some sort of correlation here between certain types of behavior being accentuated when you take these kind of things, and they're really not necessary. Now, they say sometimes, and this is a common mantra in Western society, that you need to let them make their own mistakes. No, you don't. You don't need to make your own mistakes. A wise man can learn from the mistakes of someone else. Now, you can get an insight into the quote unquote the positives of these things by hearing about other people's experiences and about what they took from that. That doesn't mean you have to experience that yourself. You don't have to murder someone and to go through the profound guilt and shame that might be associated with the realization that what you've done is wrong, in order to understand the wisdom behind the rule that you shouldn't murder people. Like, yes, I can guarantee that if you did it and felt all the negative impacts, that there would be a lot of lessons to be learned from that. But it doesn't follow that that everyone needs to make that mistake. And it's the same things like drugs, psychedelics, and stuff like that. There are mad experiences that you can have on these things. Some of them can be incredibly interesting. Some of them can be pleasurable. Some of them can be insightful. But it's, it doesn't follow from that you need to have these things as well, and that you need to come out of that in order to abstract whatever wisdom there may be within that. And there's a warning as well: be wary of wisdom that's unearned.
Mm-hmm. That's what the Buddhists call it, right?
Yeah, don't beware of unearned wisdom. And with these drugs and things like that, you get these mad little insights. But it's not the only way to achieve these insights. Mm-hmm. There are alternative methods, and that is through things like reading, like picking up books, like even just reading the accounts of people that have gone through this. You can abstract wisdom from these experiences that other people have had. You don't, subhanAllah, we live in a world where people are taking this all over the place, and they're writing about their experiences. They're doing YouTube videos on their experiences. You don't need to go through that in order to, whatever wisdom there may be in that, to have to take from it. You don't need to become an alcoholic to figure out why being alcoholics are bad. And it's just, you can get the best of both worlds by not doing it and just studying that kind of stuff. Like you can, like, listening to today's discussion that we've had, alhamdulillah, it's been a really interesting one. But inshallah, you maybe can have taken something from my telling you about my experiences with it. And maybe inshallah you can understand why you don't need to go down the route of having to take these things as well. Forget that FOMO, the fear of missing out crap. There's enough people that, subhanAllah, I'm trying to think now about the times that I've peer pressured people into taking drugs.
Bro, don't get me started.
Yeah, the guilt that I have now thinking back, like these innocent souls that just had never touched weed, never done nothing, and I beautified it to them and took them on this journey, and I made it look nice, and I painted it in all sorts of pretty things, and because I was, I mean, and like I was so familiar with that experience that I was very good at bringing people into it that had never done it before and making it an amazing thing, making it an enjoyable experience for them by knowing what sort of things cause negative reactions and stuff like that, and how to facilitate a good time. But other I regret that so much now, because it's like it was an act for the most part. It's like, in certain environments, in certain conditions, in certain contexts, I can take you on this sort of particular kind of journey. But when things get dark and this thing's a part of your life, this thing doesn't help overcome that. This thing doesn't help you to take the steps that you need in order to be able to overcome certain problems, certain issues in life. And so, I don't mean to sound like I'm beautifying it. It's the complete opposite. I'm trying to give you an insight into something so that you don't have to go and take it yourself. And I really do want to emphasize that these things are incredibly dangerous, and just not worth the time, effort, and money that you're going to end up investing in it if you do ever start to dabble in it. It's, Islam is a shield for the believer. And you, like, just the same as interest and things like that. Yeah, if you took out a loan with interest, maybe you could start a business and become a millionaire. Maybe there's lots of benefits that could come out of that. But, there's always exceptions to these rules. And you're not guaranteed to be someone who has this amazing experience out of it. It's incredibly dangerous. And the chances are more likely the case that you're going to be someone who ends up at the butt end of the realm of possible experience. And it's just really not worth that risk. And the consequences that it has on the people around you is, terrible. Like, my dad made a little decision to start taking a certain kind of drugs. Eventually it killed him, and it had a huge impact on his 3 children, on the woman that he loved, on his family. His dad was still alive when he passed, his brother, his sisters, his cousins, all those people around him that loved him. Why? Because he wanted to dabble in something and he didn't see anything wrong, and the people around him beautified it. And then subhanAllah, that's had a huge impact on the life of everyone who cared for him. So it's just not worth the risk. And like I say, you can abstract whatever wisdom is there potentially from just reading about it. You don't need to take it. Yeah, I just wanted to end on that because it felt like important, and I didn't want to.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah, man. And jazakallah khair for all the wisdom, all the insight, all these golden nuggets of just wisdom that even I've benefited so much, man. That's why I wasn't talking too much in this episode, and especially the last one we did with you, because
sorry, I do ramble.
I love learning, bro. I'm all for that. Yeah, I didn't feel that one bit. Like I feel like teachers and profs ramble, bro, because I'm not really engaged, but felt very engaged. Alhamdulillah.
I need to learn to talk less though, and I keep forgetting. And then just going on these huge 10-hour spiels. But yeah, no, jazakallah khair for having me on. It's been a pleasure. It's a weird dynamic going from watching your podcast to being on it. So thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking to both you and Rami. And
likewise. I think the audience should look forward to the TAP and T3M collab.
Inshallah. Yeah, I look forward to that as well. We need to finish that discussion. I think
yeah,
we
for sure,
having
man.
it, and then
We're good this week, next week too, so we'll make it happen, inshallah.
Inshallah. But yeah,
Jazakallah khair for the time, man. May Allah grant you a long, successful life of just continuing to influence a lot of people. Keep doing your work, being a great father. And inshallah. Man, if there's anything else, just don't hesitate to let me know.
Yeah, it's same for you, bro. Stay in touch. And Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care.
Yeah, bro.
First and foremost, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that basically when a group of companions came to him and asked, we're dealing with these horrible doubts, these doubts that if we believe them, they would lead to kufr, horrible doubts. And the Prophet ﷺ, he looked at him, he said that this is good news. This is good news. And obviously it sounds oxymoronic. How is, big doubts in faith good news? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said it's a sign of high iman. And think about it. If you have catastrophic, life-changing doubts about your religion, it can't be anything other than a sign that you have high faith, because you don't wake up in the morning and become worried that unicorns don't exist because you never believed in unicorns in the first place. So the fact that these doubts are worrying you is a sign that you have high iman, that you actually believe in Islam.